Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Getting Kinded. If you are new to my podcast, I started this as an encouragement from my counselor who said all the work that you're putting in with therapy, EMDR, until you can put pen to paper and write, let's journal on video. So that's what I'm doing. It's been a couple of weeks since I have been on here. It's been a couple weeks since I've been on here, but I am still doing therapy every week and EMDR. And this episode is a big one to unpackage. If you thought me having to process my son dying was hard, which I thought would be the hardest thing, but it's not. It is learning that I don't have daddy issues. I have mommy issues. So we are going to talk about it. Just to recap, I am doing EMDR, which is a type of therapy that is done. It is a very specific therapy that is done for trauma patients. Now, to me, I certainly do not feel like my situation qualifies as trauma. However, in the medical world or the psychology world, it does. I found my son when he passed. I found him in cardiac arrest. And so I dealt with that. And what EMDR does is it takes this trauma memory, because all of your trauma is stored in the back. So it takes that and it brings it to the forefront of your mind and you relive that. And I had to relive every single second of that morning. And by doing that, that was painful. That was very hard. That was all of the things. But then I got a chance to flip it around. And what I did with that was, instead of my son trying to raise his bed up to tell me he could not breathe, his trach had fallen out, whatever the case may be, he was just saying goodbye. Thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for being my nurse, my caregiver, my mom, my cook, the person who wiped my ass, the person who did everything. And it worked. The thing with EMDR is that negative thoughts and positive thoughts cannot live in the same place at the same time. So once I processed it in a positive way, then you can never think of it in that negative way again. And I didn't believe it until I walked into my house, and I don't feel sadness when it comes to that particular day. Do I still miss my son? Oh my God, yes. Today is 6 months to the day. We had an event at Vanderbilt to honor donor families, because my son was an organ donor. And I sobbed. I sobbed in the director of Vanderbilt Medical Centers on his shoulder. So like, I still cry. I just processed that day. So you fast forward the next week and I go in and I have to talk about my mom. And I want to tell you about my mom, and I want to tell you about what I processed. And this is very hard for me because I have never had a negative thought about my mom. I have never felt anger about my mom, towards my mom, never raised my voice at her. I never, I don't know that I cussed in front of my mom. She was a timid, small woman that you protected for some reason. And by people protecting her, it led me to seek things that gave me fulfillment, that her decisions cost me a lot. Let me just say that. I made very bad decisions on my own, all by myself. I can do bad all by myself. However, I was not taught the proper tools, the proper coping mechanisms, the proper way to tell the truth. I was taught none of that, and let me tell you why. My mom was born and raised in right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, east of here, and in a small, like literally, it is one street, and that is the city. She's the youngest of 12. 11 children survived out of that 12, and they lived in a 2-bedroom shack. My grandma and grandpa were married their whole entire life. My mom had 5 brothers, 5 sisters, and I don't know what that looked like because my grandparents were already deceased by the time I was born. So my mom has my brother. Now, what I want you to know is my mom never got married, ever. So she worked at a restaurant here, and she lived on the farm with my grandpa after my grandma died, and she just kept taking care of him and then the remaining brothers that were single living at home still. And she met a man who delivered chips, and she started seeing said man, except for said man would go home every night to his wife. Now, I'm pretty sure my mom knew he was married. And I'll tell you, you'll understand why I say that here soon. But they started an affair. I do not know how long the affair lasted. I don't know anything. This was in 1963. So clearly, I am not talking about me. I'm talking about my older brother, Jeffrey. Jeffrey was born June 1964. So he's exactly 10 years older than me. And so they had a baby together. The father was not in the picture because he's married, whatever the case may be. And my grandpa dies. Now, my mom was close to all of her sisters, but she had one sister that she was absolutely, they were in it. They were locked in together, and that was my Aunt Dina. Now, my Aunt Dina was married to my Uncle Ken, and I promise you all of the story makes sense in a second, and you'll understand why I have struggled the way I have with my entire life. So, my uncle had a chance to be transferred. He was in the Navy to Memphis, and my mom, looked at it as, hey, this is a chance for me to start fresh. I've got a new baby. My parents are dead. Let me get out of this town, and let me move to Memphis and make better decisions. Well, guess what? She did not make better decisions because she moved with my aunt and my uncle, with my brother, and my aunt and uncle had 2 kids. We all lived together as one big family, one big dysfunctional family. So she starts to work. I don't know the story of my father as far as if she got hired by him, but I know he was her boss. His wife was her best friend. Now, there was another best friend. There was actually 2 other best friends that were in this mix. And I'll try not to confuse you with all of this. But if you like gossip and small town stuff, I've got a story for you. So Erica was my dad Bob's wife. And my dad had already been previously married to another woman. And I have 2 other siblings with that woman. Or he had my 2 siblings with that woman, divorced and married Erica. Now, while my mom was in Memphis, he was having his son, Jeff, with his wife, Erica, not my Jeffrey. So I have 2 brothers named Jeff. They actually went to school together. They grew up together. We all grew up in the same town, except for I never knew they were my siblings. Obviously, I knew my brother Jeffrey was. So what I did was, my mom starts working for my father some way, somehow. And my father he was an entrepreneur. We will say that. He owned a head shop. If you don't know what a head shop is, you dirty-minded people, that's not what it is. Back in the 70s is where they would sell paraphernalia for drugs, weed, whatever the case may be. It's sold in vape shops now, but back then it was called a head shop. He owned a service station, phenomenal mechanic, the only mechanic in town. He also had 3 cafes, a taxi, a club, whatever. All this to say, all of the careers my father had was just a front, because my father was a very bad man. He had money laundering for years. His wife was actually Chicago mob. So he had some ties that he could not walk away from there. I've actually learned that recently. I was under the impression it was Memphis Mafia, not like, not a rap group, but actual mafia. But it's actually Chicago. So I'm probably not even supposed to be talking about this, but really don't care. So he starts having an affair with my mom. Now, to hear anybody who knew that situation, they would tell you that my mom and my father were in love. Unfortunately, he was married to her best friend, and they continued a relationship until she got pregnant with me. And I lived my first 8 years of my life thinking my Uncle Ken was my father. Called him Daddy. They let me. They let me call him Daddy. And so all I knew was that I had 3 parents. And so I slowly started figuring out, I don't remember the timeline at all. I don't remember when I started figuring out that, hey, Uncle Ken's not my dad. There's something weird going on here. And I can remember being 8 years old. So now we are at the place where I have to work through this moment in time in EMDR. And this moment is that at the age of 8, I walked with my mother to KFC. My mother did not drive, did not learn how to drive a car, never. So we walked everywhere we went, or took Greyhound bus, a cab, whatever the case may be. So we walked to KFC and we sat down. We were very poor. we lived in the projects. So going to KFC was a big deal. Going to Taco Bell was a good Pizza Inn is what it was called. And we sat down, and I looked at her at 8 years old, and I said, I need to know who my father is. And she said, when you're old enough, I'll tell you. And I said, I'm old enough. I'm sure I did not say, if I'm old enough to ask, because clearly that is not what 8-year-old Kendra would say. I probably stomped my foot and got mad, and apparently I did. And it was, I'm sure it was not a great moment for my mom. She was probably panicking, stressed, and so she did what she knew how to do best, which was lie. I pushed her enough that she finally said, his name is Troy Mahoney. He is a sketch artist for the police department in the neighboring town. Now, to me, this was the fucking coolest thing I could have heard. I'm totally okay that I've had 8 years of no father, because look who my badass dad is. No, it was all a lie. So, we were talking, and before she tells me about Troy, I remember chicken skin falling and me scooping it up, and I would eat it, and I bit into a ladybug that had landed, and I spit it on her, and she really thought I was so mad I was spitting on her, and obviously I would have never done that to my mom. So, you fast forward through my years of turning from 8 to 16 when we left Memphis and moved back to Nashville, and those were some really hard times for me. I did not know who I was. What I did not know was the man that was actually my father was a family friend that came over just about every night. And I could remember him making me feel very uncomfortable because he stared at me so much. I didn't know what that uncomfortable feeling meant. I just knew I didn't like it. And it's because he knew I was his daughter. I babysat my sisters without knowing they were my sisters. And everybody in my family knew the truth. Fuck, everybody in my town knew the truth except me. So I was not athletically inclined by any stretch. So my mom got me into modeling and beauty pageants. They were going to afford me scholarships. They were going to, all my dresses, everything I had a sponsor was paid for. But you live in a small town, and at that time, it was it was a city outside of Memphis. This is 84, 82, 84. I started modeling at about the age of 11 and doing beauty pageants, and everybody in town knew I didn't have a dad, and they knew that my mom fucked with married men. So to them, that made me a whore. I was a model, so obviously I thought I was better than... Clearly, I don't think I'm better than fucking anybody, okay? I don't know who I am at this point, but So I had to work through that day in KFC, and it took a couple of sessions, and it took me laying on the ground and screaming at my mom in that moment, just saying, I need you to understand what this is going to do to me in the future. I need you to understand, by you not telling me who my father is, by you not having him show up, by you not giving me that chance, what you did was you made me question my worth my entire life. You made me question every single person who spoke anything to me because I didn't believe them. You made me think that I was only good enough because of the way I looked with men. And it took a long time, and I don't know, that moment is no longer negative for me, but I don't know how long it's going to take for me to forgive my mother. But on the flip side of that, I have to look at the strength she had to protect us. She moved my brother away, maybe so his dad's wife wouldn't find out. She moved him to Tennessee, to Memphis, to start a better life. And she got caught up with a man, like a lot of us do. And maybe she had some daddy issues I don't know about. I think the thing that hurts me the most is I found out recently that she told my brother that she didn't even give birth to me, that she adopted me. She went to the hospital, said she had to have her gallbladder taken out. She came home with a baby. 5 years later, she did the same thing. And so what that tells me is that I have another sibling out there, but this one's my only true sibling. We have the same mother and father. I've tried finding this child, and I can't. So we moved here, and when we moved here, my brother and I were sitting in the car, and I asked him, "Who's my dad?" I knew it wasn't Troy. I'd been carrying Troy for 8 years, telling people, even though I knew, thinking that if I just lied to them, they would believe me. So that's when I started lying. And that's all I did. Yeah, I did. Used people, lied. I made really bad decisions. I drank Hunch Punch out of bathtubs when I was 12 years old on Bill Street. I had no supervision. I was not taught. Thankfully, I was taught respect. I was taught how to love people. And I've always loved people, but I was not taught how to have respect for myself. And so I asked my brother, "Who's my father?" And he said, "You know." And I was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "You know." And guys, in that moment, I went, "It's Bob." I don't know how I knew. It was a moment of clarity that I remember so well. I remember where we were sitting. I remember where we were in town, what vehicle we were in. And he opened his wallet and handed me a calling card. And back then, you had to have a calling card to call a long distance. And I called. My father, my other brother, Jeff, answered. I didn't tell him who I was. I just said, "Can I speak to Bob?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's across the street. I'll go get him." I remember my father's voice. And I remember it sounded like whiskey. I don't know how else to explain it. Like smooth bourbon. I think that's the first time I've ever described his voice. I could see why my mom would be attracted. Like, his voice was just great. And I said, "My name is Kendra, and I want to know if you're my father." And he said, "I am." And he said, "I wanted to tell you your mom wouldn't let me." And I don't remember if I said, "Fuck you," or "Okay, bye," whatever. And I got a Christmas card from him that year with $20 in it. And he died the next year. So the first time I ever saw my father, he was in the casket. The first time I saw my father, and I knew he was my father. And there's lots of other siblings mixed in. So this past week, I went into my therapy session and said, "You know, I don't think I've processed everything with my mom, but I don't think I can keep going in that direction." And the next portion of this video, I'm going to give a trigger warning on. So I went in on Monday and he said, "What do you want to target?" And I said, "I really don't know. I'm not ready to deal with my father. I'm not ready to finish with my mom." And he was like, "Okay, I just want you to close your eyes." And he said, "What did you feel when you were 8 with your mom?" And I said that I wasn't worth fighting for, or I wasn't worth telling the truth. And he said, "Let's go with that." So you close your eyes and you have headphones on, and you hear this sound, and you're carrying paddles, and it vibrates back and forth. And the next thing I know, I'm walking down the street from my high school. I have on Tavia Dunkel's Jordache sweatsuit. I never got anything new, and I had my best friend Tavia, and I remember it was gray, and it was the coolest thing. And inside, when you rolled the legs up, because that's what you did in 88, it had plaid. And I had been in love with this boy named Jeremy. In love, right? I had been 14 years old for a month. And Jeremy pulled up, and I just thought, wow. Wow. Like, the guy that I'm in love with at 14 years old has pulled up to talk to me. And in the passenger seat is a guy named Matt. And Matt is literally, we grew up together. So I felt completely safe with Matt. And he said, "Come, ride around with us to Shelby Forest." That's the park in Memphis. And I said, "I got to call my mom." And I went and found a payphone, and I think Jeremy gave me a dime. I think that's how much it was. And I called her and I said, hey, I got asked to be on the homecoming committee. That's the first time I ever lied to my mom. And she should have known I would have never been on the fucking homecoming committee. And she was like, okay, have fun. I'll see you when you get home. And I got in the truck and they had whiskey under the seat. Now, I didn't drink. And we drove around and we went to this cow pasture. And I was just looking at Jeremy what's going on? Like, you know, I didn't know anything about sex. I didn't know anything about anything. And I just knew that I liked this boy, and obviously he liked me. And Matt said, do you want to flip a coin for who gets her first? I don't think I had ever even kissed a boy at that point. And I remember I got Jeremy out of the truck and I said, I don't understand. I thought it was just like going to be you and me hanging out. He's like, oh, I'll take him back. And we got in the truck and Matt just called me so many names. And he dropped Matt off. And I let him take me back to that cow pasture. And I remember Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses was playing. And I remember Octavia Dunkel's pants were around my ankles. And I couldn't get him to stop. But at the same time, I don't know if I wanted him to, because I had his full attention. And I had never had man's full attention that I knew of. So I got home. I had to walk. And I remember I had to go take a bath because there was blood. And I walked in the door and my mom was on the phone with my father's wife. Because she didn't know about the affair. She didn't know I was her husband's child. And I walked in on my mom saying, Kendra is such a good girl. She's still a virgin. And I looked at her and went, and it wasn't even disappointment in her eyes. I think she realized in that moment what her actions had led me to do. I willingly went there, absolutely. But if I'd have had any kind of value in myself, I would have never even gotten the truck in the first place. So I blame myself for that. And she asked me some questions about what happened. And she asked me if... She just asked me some things about what happened. And I didn't really know what any of it meant. I didn't know how to answer her questions. So, yeah, that was August of 1984. And by October, I had already slept with Matt. Because Jeremy was done with me. So Matt stepped in the picture. And that's what I did. I sought validation from men. And I was 14 years old. I was 14 years old. And my mom knew I had a 27-year-old boyfriend. I was 14 years old. My mom let me stay the night at his house. I think my mom had so much pain and turmoil from her lies that she didn't want to discipline me. She didn't force me to do well in school. She didn't force me to go to school. She didn't force anything. When the bullying got so bad on me, where people were throwing things at my house and threatening me because their boyfriends were trying to date me, and not because I was anything special, but because they knew they could go all the way with me. And that is as a woman, as a mom to a woman, that is heartbreaking to say. So, I went through that session. And I got to look at both of those men. And I got to tell them exactly what I thought about them. And I got to tell them that they no longer can touch me. I am not that girl in Tavia Dunkel's Jordache sweatsuit. 14 years old. I am not. I'm also not this broken shell of a woman that I should be. So I have so much fucking worth that sometimes when I wake up, I'm blown away by the way I feel about myself. Because I no longer am tied to those lies. And I'm no longer tied to the deceit. And I'm no longer tied to Jeremy or Matt or any of those boys. I'm tied to my core values now and what I know to be my truth. So I don't know what my next session is going to be. Obviously, I have to work through my father. I have to finish working through my mom. And that's going to be a big one. But I can do hard things because I am doing hard things. So I thank you for sticking around. Please drop a note in the comment if you want to know any questions, or if you have any questions about EMDR or just about my train wreck of a life up until this point. I would love to chat with you. Thanks. Bye.